intact, you can restart the server and send the request, everything will work. So let me draw an example. So let us think about a web application to manage a network. Okay? So there's this web application to manage, let's say for Moroto Computer Science Department, so Moroto University, there's a web application to manage the network. So users can view, query, and see network, etc. If you have enough permissions, you can change things, etc. So let us look at this from both SOA view as well as resource-oriented architecture view. Okay? With the service-oriented architecture, you will have set of operations or processing units. Okay? So you can say list networks. I want to get the information about a network. I want to change a network, search a network. Now notice that everything is a verb. You search, you do things. Okay? So with SOA, all these things you see are the actions. You send data, and there's this data in the storage, which might use for processing, but what you interact with are these operations. Okay? Now, one important thing is that if you use SOA, each of these operations are described through what we call a WSDL. Okay? It exactly says that if you send a message, it should look like this with details. Okay. Now, if you use REST, now it's all about nouns. So you basically identify everything, every resource in it. So if you are thinking about the Moroto network, so I mean, I'm only looking at the simplified view. You can think that there's an electronic department has a network, civil department has a network, so on and so forth. Right? So you can do a get on networks, and it will return something like this, basically saying networks, and it will refer to each of the, so the network / ENT means a resource for ENT network. Now, if you do a get on it, you will get information about it. Now, if you have enough permission, maybe you can delete it. Right? So if you look at the different verbs, if you do a get, you get the data. You do a post to update, etc. Now draw the contrast where now everything is a noun. Now it's very important to see that you are doing the same thing with the both ways. It's just two philosophy of design. You can design it thinking about resources and connect them through the implementation. Or you can only think about the verbs, the actions, still the implementation has the connections. Okay? So now, another interesting thing about REST is that it can actually return multiple formats. Now, I don't know how much, if you know about HTTP, with HTTP, the browser can say that when I do a get, he can send a header saying accept. You can give a list. Here basically it says, so you can say that, okay, I'm accepting XML responses, HTML responses, etc. So the server is supposed to send the response in one of these. So by sending that header, the browser or the client says that I understand these formats. Okay? Then the server is supposed to send you back a result in one of these formats. Now, of course, server might not support it, then maybe he has sent you error. But assuming it can support it, it's supposed to respond in one of these formats. So this is actually where, one of the huge strength of HTTP, which actually another advantage of REST. With the REST, actually the one same service can support many different formats compared to SOA, where actually through the WSDL it is much more tightly defined. So this gives rise to a very huge fight, basically saying SO guy says you guys don't have a description of the service, whereas RO guy says if you have a description, you are tightly coupled, and then they go on and on. Okay? So as I said before, all the communication is stateless, right? So okay. Now, if you want to implement a REST, so now when you take most of the architectures, you can implement it either way, right? So I am not saying it is, REST is the way, but people usually know about SOA. So I'm talking about how you do it in a REST case, okay? So of course you have to, okay, now truth is that doesn't matter the REST, SOA, etc. There's no single way to architect a system, okay? That's how we we safeguard our jobs, but so you have to understand the problem and figure out what are the principal components, what happens there, etc. So you have to figure out the resource structure. So if you do SOA, you have to figure out these critical actions in your application, which I'm going to compose. Whereas if you are using REST, you have to figure out these resources. Okay? So you then define URLs for each resource. So now, for example, now if you take the network thing, now there may be a new department added to the computer science, the Moratua, and there may be a new network, so you don't know the URL yet, but you know the URL pattern. So you say that this URL pattern means a network for that department. Okay? So then what you do is, for different URL patterns in your system, you attach code. For example, now if you look at this example, so you write code it says like when you see that network URL with the HTTP, with the operation get and content type text.xml, do something, right? So, there's so you still need programmers who are going to write your distributed application, right? So now, if it is SOA, what you do is you figure out all the actions, okay, and you implement them. It accepts data, do things, and give out something or store things, etc. Whereas if you do REST, you identify all the resources and attach code with the URL patterns for all these resources. For example, if you look at this Synetra, that's a very good example how you attach code, etc. Okay, so then once you do that, so now you have all these resources online or working, so you talk to them using your get, put, etc., and start doing things. So let me show you a couple of things that you might do wrong when you are doing REST. So the first of all, if I said um.lk search networks, right? Now it's a URL, right? So you can address, so it's a service, you search the network by accessing it. But it breaks something, which is, it's a verb actually, right? So the search network is not a resource, it's a verb. Now, or even if you do this, if you put verbs, even if you are doing SOA using HTTP. This is not resource-oriented architecture. So it should be um/networks, okay? And you do a post on it, you do a get with some query parameters, okay? So this is, okay, now this again one of the big fights, but in this, the people who promote REST are right. Basically, this is wrong, okay? So, and if you do REST, you have to be very careful with the status codes, because not like SOA, etc. Here the status codes really drive the execution. And usually, when you return responses, etc., you use references rather than putting the data in. So if you are returning the list of networks, you shouldn't embed all the data in the results. You should basically link, saying, the CSC network, ENT network, etc. Now, remember, this always, now when you think about REST, if you are doing a resource-oriented architecture, compared to the web. How does it work in the web? The whole, if you are doing REST, the main reason you are doing it is it worked with the web. Sorry, the web worked, so you are going to try to follow something similar. Okay, let me wrap up. So I kind of answered this. Basically, I do not believe it is the architecture for everything. But neither is SOA, right? So these are two patterns which if you are the solution architect, you have to know, and you have to choose wisely. So how do you know you are doing it right? So again, I mean, okay, that's why you paid for your architect. But if you are using it rightly, it feels so natural, right? For example, let's say that there are some resources that you want to expose to the other guys. Now, SOA looks so out of place for that, whereas just exposing it as REST things, you can get information, delete, add, put things, which is so natural. Whereas, like, if you are doing very complicated process, and if you try to match it to these resources which goes here and there, you start feeling so out of place. Now, you might ask, is it a good idea to mix the REST and SOA together? Maybe okay, but be careful, because don't put so if you have a huge architecture, maybe one component can be REST, whereas the other component can be SOA, because it's natural for each part. But if you are doing something small, stick with one, because especially if you are not an expert, you can very easily mix up both and end up with something in between. So basically, what I tried to explain was what a distributed application. There are two ways to solve it. Resource-oriented architecture and service-oriented architecture. Try to compare and contrast. So you have to kind of know the both. So you can read this if you want more information. I think, at least from our programming background, I think actions are more natural, because at least with SOA, we can mostly take, it's not completely true, but mostly we can take our own objects, own business objects you had, and just start exposing them to outside. In that sense, it's since we are taught from when we learn to think in those actions, maybe actions are more natural. So that does not necessarily mean it's the best, but I think with our training, etc., I think the actions are more natural for a newcomer. But I'm sure you can build the view if you, yeah.